welcome everybody. My name is Timothy Douglas. I work as actually a lecturer in chemical engineering, and I do research into biomedical engineering. And as you may have guessed, like you, I love languages, and I learn a lot of them but through collaboration with my partners. And what's great about an academic career is that you can combine these two interests. So science is done in so many different countries, and so there are excellent opportunities, to collaborate with people from other countries who speak other languages. And by actually learning the other languages, you can have better cooperations, you can have more collaborations with people from other countries. So then that's good for your science. So doing science is good for language learning, and language learning is good for doing science. But why today we're talking about Ukrainian and making a difference. Now, the first slide says Ukrainian spoken, slides and subtitles in English. Today, I'm actually going to just to speak in English, but I will make a version in Ukrainian, so available. First of all, I'll tell you why I learned Ukrainian, and then how I learned it, and then how could I make a small difference in the lives of people by learning Ukrainian. So the main message for today is, we are language learners. Some of us are polyglots, and we learn languages for many reasons, and often because we like a certain country, which is great, or we like a certain language, which is also great. But maybe we could be thinking about using our skills as language learners to learn the languages which are most useful, to help people. And Ukrainian, because of the tragic events there, is very topical. So I thought, could I make use of my language learning skills in order to learn this language more quickly, which is of use to people, at this moment in time. So, as I mentioned before, I work in the United Kingdom. I'm British, and I grew up as a monolingual English speaker. As I mentioned, I do research in chemical engineering, lecture in chemical engineering, and I do research in biomedical engineering. And because of my international collaborations, which I love, I often use many languages, including Russian and Polish and Czech. And my philosophy is that to learn a language well, you have to butcher it. So you have to use it very badly and very often. It's like, playing a musical instrument. If you want to play a musical instrument well, then you have to you have to play it often and often badly to improve. Now, many of you will know Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, a hyperpolyglot activist. And if you don't know his site, it's worth checking out, because he has a lot of videos on aspects of languages and language learning which aren't discussed so much. And his slogan is "Learn languages, make a difference." And that's certainly something that we can be doing. I started, in the case of Ukrainian, I started on the 24th of February. My motivation for doing so was vague at the start. I thought, well, what can I do to make a positive difference? And, also, what could I do that other people could not do? And I thought that if there's a war, unfortunately, there are almost certainly going to be refugees. And some of them will speak Ukrainian without a doubt. And I thought, well, I speak Russian fluently and I speak Polish fluently, so I can learn Ukrainian more quickly than the average British person. Okay. And I thought, well, learning Ukrainian would be a sign of support for, Ukrainian culture in general at this difficult time. And then maybe I can help, with translations, or when refugees arrive in my, town, I can talk to them and maybe help them with practical matters. Now, one great thing about learning similar languages, the founder of this conference, Richard Simcott, said quite recently that learning similar languages is more about learning the differences rather than fundamentally new things. And he's right. And I don't know if some of you use a natural method of learning. I know there are different definitions, but the way I look at it is learning something naturally is of learning by simply absorbing it and trying to notice patterns in what you're listening to or what you're reading without sort of studying it so much. And that's the magic of learning similar languages. You can absorb a language much more quickly thanks to your prior knowledge of other languages. And so for me, I find Ukrainian to be a delicious mixture. When I read it or when I listen to it, I see a lot from, Russian, and then also a lot, from Polish. And it's, for me, Ukrainian seems like, mixture of these two, Russian and Polish, but also I can see a little bit of Czech there, or sort of certain words or maybe certain expressions that are similar sort of to those sort of used in Czech. So it's an exotic language for me. How do I learn it? Well, I try not to give advice on how to learn languages because everybody has a different style, a different preference, and I usually only give two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is your own advice is probably the best advice. And this one here, what's the best method to learn languages? This question is asked all the time in the language learning community. And this man said, the best method is the method you'll stick with, the one you do regularly. And I completely agree. So I try to integrate Ukrainian into my everyday activities, such as, work and hobbies and so on, so I can practice automatically without trying. So for instance, if I have to write an email to somebody in Ukraine or who speaks Ukrainian, I'll write it in Ukrainian. So I'm just doing my work, but just practicing Ukrainian at the same time. Language learning is considered to be, 4 skills. Now, to be honest, there are many, many more skills involved in language learning rather than just reading, speaking, listening, and writing. But that's another discussion. For speaking, I use italki, which and italki, I'm not saying italki is better than other platforms, and I'm not being sponsored by italki in any way, but it's very easy to use consistently because you just have to click, and then you start talking, and no matter what time zone you're in, usually there's somebody in a similar time zone to you. And I must say, an advantage of Ukrainian, at least on italki, is that when you learn it, the prices often are lower than those asked by teachers, for Western European languages. At least that's my sort of impression. Regarding listening, listening is easy to do. So that's to do regularly, and it's compatible, with this natural way of learning. So that's why I use it most of all. It's very easy to use periods in the day, when maybe your body is occupied but your mind is free. So, for instance, when you're working in the kitchen or whatever, and to pick up the language while by listening. And also, I think an advantage of listening is that you don't have to be paying attention all the time. Even if you're only partially paying attention, you can still learn something by listening, even if you're not concentrating. Okay, so in the same way as you will pick up information if you have a radio in the background, if you have some of your Ukrainian in the background, you will pick up a few things, just even if you're not paying attention to it all the time. Okay. So as you can see, my approach to language learning is very sort of pragmatic. Okay, maybe it's not the best method if you want to learn in the most professional manner possible, but I think the main challenge is simply finding time to do something and finding time to do it regularly. That's our main challenge as adults, and so I think that's what I focus on, just finding time and using it. So the story started on my first day, 24th of February. I looked at some YouTube sites for Ukrainian, and just simple sites with 500 words or 200 phrases in Ukrainian and Polish, which is similar. And by just repeating these and listening to them, I was able to absorb vocabulary naturally. Okay. And I mean, there are many words that are similar between Ukrainian and Polish, and also Ukrainian and Russian. And I was also able to see the differences between Polish and Ukrainian. So what do the Ukrainians do differently from Polish speakers and Russian speakers? And in the first week, I also started to butcher on Twitter. Twitter is actually very easy to use consistently. It's designed for that. It's designed for short messages, for regular use. So why not exploit this in order to learn languages? And it's also interactive. You can write about somebody. You can write. People can read what you're reading. So it's more fun. And then one great thing is I use is a smartphone. Now, a smartphone is, people spend far too much time on their smartphones anyway. Smartphones are addictive. So why not use the addictive power of smartphones to learn languages? If you're spending so much time on your smartphone, spend it in another language. And also, it has a great function, this autocorrect. Now, autocorrect is good if you're trying to learn Ukrainian and Russian and Polish, because if you don't know a word, you can think to yourself, let's type in a similar word in Russian or Polish, and then the autocorrect will suggest some words for you that you can choose, and often they'll be the right word will be there. And I think that's it's a sort of extensive writing, as it were. You're trying actually by just writing, and then by these words coming up automatically that may be right, you can find the right one. I think that's a nicer way of learning than learning vocabulary from a book or whatever. And also reading on Twitter, you have people writing in Ukrainian. It's easy to read short messages consistently than read a long text consistently. So anything that's good for consistency is good for language learning. Then I started to look at some YouTube sites for Ukrainian. I like these easy languages channels like Easy Ukrainian, because when they talk, you also have the subtitles. So if you have difficulty, you can always read and you can listen at the same time. Okay. And then I looked at some more YouTube sites. Now, these are three that I've used. I particularly used Let's Learn Ukrainian. There's also the site of Ina Sopronchuk, Speak Ukrainian, and this Verba as well. They're not, for me, they weren't ideal because most of their material is actually designed for beginners or people who have never learned a Slavic language before. But there is good material there for intermediate learners. I think that if you already know a Slavic language, then the beginner phase when you learn Ukrainian is very short. Okay, and then you can. They have interviews. They have some dialogues which are sort of useful. And on the subject of interviews, many of you will know Marta Melnik, a teacher of Ukrainian to polyglots, a polyglot herself. I recommend her YouTube channel, and she gives interviews with people and also talks a lot, but she speaks very clearly, and you can learn a lot actually, I think, by listening to her her conversations and her monologues on her channel. So okay. And then after 5 months, I started to think, well, I'd like to learn some more specialized vocabulary. And also, so I thought, where can I find something that's more challenging, but maybe not at the level of a conversation between native speakers? So I looked at some web canals on YouTube, channels on YouTube for school children, and I think these are understandable for people at an intermediate level, because teachers speak clearly because they're teaching children, and you can find specialized vocabulary as well. I'm interested in biomedical engineering, and so I'm particularly interested in online videos for school children, which are about biology, also physics and chemistry. And another motivation for learning them was because I also help with medical translations. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Yes. So there's one non-governmental organization. I mean, there are several, but the one I volunteer for is called Respond Crisis Translation. And they're language activists, and they do volunteer translations of documents, from many languages into many other languages, including Ukrainian. And at the moment, there's a big demand for people who for translation of documents in Ukrainian and also in Russian because of the war in Ukraine. Now, there are lots of Russian translators, but far fewer Ukrainian translators. So therefore, if you know Ukrainian, I would urge you to get in contact with these people and then offer your services to translate from Ukrainian into other languages. Mainly because of my background, I translate, medical documents of some refugees have, complicated medical histories or problems such as cancer, which require treatment over a longer period of time. So in order for doctors to continue their treatment, they need to know the patient, sort of history. So I've been helping with that. And by knowing Ukrainian, I've also been able to talk to and help a little bit the Ukrainians who have arrived in Lancaster, so my town. So here you can see two websites, Facebook pages for groups that help Ukrainians. And in the words of one person who works with another person who's learnt Ukrainian and works with refugees who have arrived, speaking their language makes such a difference to those arriving and visibly reduces their fear and anxiety. Yes, and I have had the experience with Ukrainian visitors in the United Kingdom. The fact that you can speak Ukrainian, they are glad, that somebody has taken the trouble to learn their language. And sometimes some Ukrainians, if they have questions, they will come to me and they will ask their questions to me because they know they can express themselves, in Ukrainian, or Russian in a way that would be more difficult for them in English. Okay. I also decided to organize a couple of conferences on learning Ukrainian. I call them Lukranian conferences because my university is Lancaster University, LU, and they're about learning Ukrainian to make a difference. And there are many ways in which you can help people by learning Ukrainian, not just translating for them or interpreting for them, but also simply by amplifying the voices of Ukrainian speakers. I've organized 2 so far, a third one soon, and I think because of the interest of Ukrainian in Ukrainian, it's nice to unite the people who are also learning Ukrainian worldwide. And also my final example. Our university has recently started to work together with a university in Ukraine. And by knowing Ukrainian, you can actually find out more information and make more contacts than by speaking English. In science, there is a misconception that English is the language of science and it's the only language. No, it isn't. Of course, I don't have to explain this to any of you, but some people have the idea that because a lot of manuscripts are published in English and because a lot of international science conferences have presentations by people in English, that English is the only language. But science is full of different languages, and English in science may open many doors for you, but it won't open every door, and it won't open every door as widely as some other languages might. But to come back to the example of Ukraine, if you look at the Ukrainian version of the university website, I found this very interesting specialism, which is biotechnological and medical material science. That's of my area. And so, and then after clicking on that, I was able to find information about some colleagues and then make contact with them and then arrange to have a meeting with them online. If you were to click on the English version of the same page, then you don't see this information. There's no evidence that the course exists. And if you click on one of these links, then you just get an error message. Oh, I'm sorry, this page does not exist. Okay, so you will not see generally the same thing on the English version of a university page as you will in the version in the language of the country. So my final slide, we are polyglots, okay? We can learn languages quickly. Let's enjoy learning languages and let's use our skills in order to learn a language, to make a difference if we can. And an even more important message, there's a need for people who know Ukrainian. If you're learning this language, if you know this languages, think about volunteering for an organization which helps, refugees, because many refugees, need translations of their documents to move on with their lives. So I'd like to thank my colleague Derek Hurd, who has supported, my Ukrainian conferences. Also, Chris Coy, who's learning Ukrainian and also has did a lot of very nice artwork, which you just saw for my conferences. And then many thanks to you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, I'm very happy to take them now.